And I want to welcome friends. Thank you for joining us for Lake Erie Yearly Meeting 2020's annual sessions. This afternoon, we're joined by Lucy Duncan from American Friends Service Committee, and our workshop topic is on bystander intervention. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Lucy. If you do your own introduction, I probably would mess it up. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, great to see you all.
Everyone,
hi,
everybody.
Please. What'd you say? Did you say, Rick?
I was just asking everyone to mute. There was someone.
Yeah. I won't mute, but hopefully others will. It's great to be with you today. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slide deck, but I'd like us to begin with a moment of centering of worship as we start. But I'll pull this up before so we can begin. Whoops. So yeah, let's begin with a moment of silence. I'm Lucy Duncan. I'm the Director of Friends Relations for the American Friends Service Committee. Tomorrow is my 9-year anniversary with the Service Committee. And my role is to create avenues and foster connections between Quakers and AFSC that support our program work, but that also just make it possible for us to work together for justice and liberation. I'm excited to be sharing this training with you today, which I'll tell you more about after we gather in worship. Thanks for being here. Thank you, everyone. Lovely to be with you. We're gonna, so this bystander intervention training was created, AFSC and it was created in response to the increase in violent harassment and attacks in public. Particularly when we're in public spaces. And I really love this training because I think that it in the face of the calls to defund the police and the exposure of the sort of really prevalent police violence and harassment, I think that we need to create visions for what community safety looks like that rely on us taking care of one another. And if we all saw ourselves as responsible for the safety of our neighbors or the people that are in our communities that may not be our neighbors, I think we would have a really different world. And though this training is not necessarily a training in like how to do interpersonal interventions around racist comments or things like that, I think that a lot of the principles can really apply. And I think it's an amazing training because it's hard to do on Zoom, but we are going to try and enact some of the, to really try and act out some of the incidents so that you have a sense of, a bodily sense of what it would mean to be able to intervene. And I think it's also very pragmatic and simple in terms of shifting our mindset from, I couldn't do that. Simple that could be really impactful. So I think it's a powerful training in that way. And I think that the prevalence right now of so many of these kinds of acts, whether it's white supremacists or people who are not wearing masks, who are actually can be pretty difficult. The need for this kind of thing is, I think, pretty deep. And I really appreciate you all being here and being open to learning how to do this. And I did want to say that Helen, who I think is here in advance of this webinar, reached out to me and sent me an incident that was posted by somebody that she's friends with on Facebook, an occurrence of Asian a racist act. And so we're going to actually use that example as one of the first examples when we think about how to intervene. So, and also if you put your name in the chat and say, you know, where you're from, just so you all know who's and feel free, I'm sure you all know how to use chat by now. Feel free to chat during the course of the training. We will be using the chat for different parts of it to create some interactivity. So feel free to use that as we move forward. Looks like you are. Great, I'm glad. And I'll take a look as well. So the goals of bystander intervention training, and I love this little community defining what safety means for itself, like really thinking about like what safety means and what really makes us safe and what doesn't, what actually interrupts that safety is really important practice to do right now. This is a picture of one of the people in the People's Response Team presenting this. So the goals of the training are to provide resources and tools, to offer some space to practice what we preach. Obviously on Zoom, that's going to be a little different. And I would encourage you to take this training, which is posted. I'm going to show you the website where it's posted. Think about it, maybe actually act it out in your living room or in other ways. But you'll get a little bit of a sense of that from what we do today. And a piece of our commitment is really to love and protect each other. That's part of what being in community means, and it's an important thing. And the other really big piece, I think that really being grounded and listening to our bodies in these situations can give us a lot of the information that we need so that we can act mindfully and productively in situations of harm. And again, the training was produced by the People's Response Team, and I'll show you where to find the manual at the end of the training. So I'm gonna switch and stop sharing and then share a Word document so that we can work together on the first questions here. Yeah. So I'd like you, let's see, how many people do we have on the training? We have about 50 people. So I actually think I'm going to let you all, if you can be mindful of other people who are unmuting, I'd like to invite you, instead of just using the chat, to actually say the things and just try not to talk over each other. I know it's a challenge with a lot of people on the screen. And I'd like you to think about what are the biggest barriers to intervening and what keeps you remaining a bystander. And again, just feel free to unmute yourself and I'll record what you all say.
Fear.
Yep.
Concern at escalating it.
Yeah, big one.
Specifically, fear of retaliation.
This is really important, these things, and in the training we're going to teach you sort of how to really do de-escalation so that fear is a little bit mitigated. Doesn't take it all over.
I have one because I live in a mostly Black, extremely poor neighborhood in Iowa City, and I was in trouble because was worried about a dog that looked lost, so I called about it. And then I almost got beat up because I was on the phone and they thought I was calling the police. So you have to know the culture. You must know the culture and what they might be terrified of. You may be, you know, putting terrible panic and fear into them without knowing it, because they may not be from your same culture. And
This one is that's a really important one, and we're going to talk more about the problematics of calling the police, and the role of sort of communication and consent when we're intervening.
Lucy, my barrier, at least in some situations, in some contexts, would be how do I intervene without damaging family relationships? For example, I have some older racist family members, and you know, what do I do about that?
So this actually isn't going to be talking about those interpersonal ones. I'm actually doing another webinar series called Radical Acting in Faith, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about in the next webinar, which you'll be able to find online, the recording of it. So we're not. This is really that is a kind of violence. Those interpersonal things, and learning how to do it well is really, really important. And some of these principles could be applied, but it's not specifically teaching that. So
I have another one. It's the expectation that somebody else will take care of it.
yes, yes, that one is so important. And I think that the shift of understanding our own agency and our own power in situations in which we feel like we have limited power is a really huge shift, and one that I think is sort of a global political mandate right now.
This is
so
one
that's a really important one, and that we can help somebody.
Never targeted a group myself. One of the concerns in coming to someone else's rescue is where I might not then be turned on and targeted.
Yeah, I think that one's really important, and I'll tell you an anecdote about that, because I think our social location does impact the kinds of strategies that we would employ, and whether you would intervene in a more direct way. If you're in a more privileged social location, your intervention may be seen quite differently than if you're somebody who's Black or Latinx or trans or any other social location that is. That's a really important point.
This is sort of
for me, like if it were a situation like seeing a parent being abusive towards a child in public, partly I would feel like I don't want to make the parent feel any worse. Like I'd like it to stop, but I'm not trying to make someone else feel bad. It's like I don't want to make them feel bad. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that issues of domestic violence, there's so many layers and a really deeper level of care in that kind of a situation, in terms of how you would handle something like that. Yeah, want to intervene, not someone, but that's a really important one in terms of actually in lots of interventions, in terms of somebody causing harm, that shame actually can prevent accountability and prevent moving towards behaving in different ways. That's a really important point.
unintended intimidation. It just seems to catch a couple of these that I don't want to start something where someone feels intimidated. And that seems to be several of these that we're talking about.
I think that's a really important one too. And that's where paying attention to the situation and being conscious of your social location, because you don't want to be perceived as somebody, who's adding to the problem. And I think we'll be talking about tips around that. That's a really good one.
I get
Two more.
kind of stunned and can't think of fast enough of what to say.
Yeah. Often we clench or we brace, and we're experiencing like a shock in the situation. So we're going to talk about tools for that, and also, even if that happens, some tools for still being able to do something.
I will add another one, which is not necessarily pleasant, but it's realistic. A tendency to voyeurism.
Mm.
You mean that people watch but don't do anything? Is that what you mean?
That or subconscious tendency to watch things. We watch bad things, negative things all the time on television and elsewhere. But somehow, you know, the average accident, you know, a lot of people standing around, and what they have a tendency to want to see.
I think that's important, and I think also that people see themselves as not necessarily as actors, but as consumers, right? Or as people who, yeah. So I think that's a really important one too, that we're so accustomed to seeing violence or things like that, that we just watch it and don't see ourselves as part of what's happening.
What, as a witness?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't see it. Yeah. Well, witnessing can be really important if it's a little bit more active. All right, I'm going to stop there, and I have another question for you all. How do you know when a situation requires intervention? And if you can keep calling out, but try and be really succinct, because, and I may ask you to say more, but it would be nice to like get a little list here. How do you know when a situation requires intervention?
Or differential.
I think somebody spoke, but I couldn't hear you.
Power differential.
Yeah, if there's a power differential between the person harming and the person being harmed, that's probably a good assessment tool.
Lucy, we can't see your screen now. Your typing is off screen.
Oh, I see. You know what? I know why. I'll do it again. Now, can you see it again?
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Person looks in distress.
Yeah.
Say that. Go ahead, Claire.
I said the person looks in distress.
I guess in the case that I sent you, being in the grocery store and having witnessing someone being told, go back to your own country.
So overt statements of harm.
I would say you don't always know, but if it looks threatening, you can just stop and wait and watch.
Really important that you watch. So in instances like that, time seems to slow down often, and in a few seconds you can sort of monitor if you're paying close attention to what's happening. Monitor and assess, and I think that's a really important first.
When you have that uh-oh feeling in your gut.
Paying attention to your gut, it can help a lot, yes.
When you see a white person interrupting a person of color over and over and over.
I had a thing that happened to me personally as a teenager, that this kid grabbed my arm and wouldn't let go of my arm because he says, give me your money. And I was the white person standing on the sidewalk, and there were these black people walking by me, and they could see exactly what was going on. But
they, you know, they just walked on by, and I managed to drag him out into the street. That's how I got away from him. But I certainly, if everything was reversed and I saw someone being grabbed, or you know, talk about, you know, people trying to kidnap kids and drag them into cars, someone being physically, you know, physically assaulted.
Yeah, sometimes that would be the situation that would emerge. Yeah. And I also wanted to say that people not acting is very common. So you know, whatever the social location, somebody needs to mute themselves. You're echoing. People not doing something is very common. You know, white people not doing something, other, you know, Black folks not doing something. That's a really common thing. So, but yeah, you might see somebody being grabbed.
I have one, documenting any law officer interaction, expecting that you may be important for capturing footage.
That's a really important one, and we are going to do one scenario around this. So that given the moment, and given not the moment, but the last whatever hundreds of years, the way that police operate and treat people of color. I think Maxine Waters recently just saw police interacting with a Black man, and she stopped her car to sort of see what was happening and to intervene. So the sort of right now, the sort of heightened sense that if particularly if a person of color is pulled over by the police, that something bad could happen, and being watchful of that, I think, is really, really important.
So one thing I want to say, and it kind of refers to the statement that someone being grabbed and other people having not responding. And one question sometimes I know people have is, can they safely intervene?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that quickly. And I want to say that there's a sort of a range. I mean, many people know of the story in Portland where I think a Muslim woman was being attacked, and I think 2 white men intervened, and one of them got stabbed and was killed. So, my sense is they completely did the right thing, and being aware of the volatility of situations, especially right now, is important. At this end, and what I would say is that we're going to teach you some things that are like de-escalation and not putting yourself quite as much at risk. But I also think that in the process of undoing like massive kind of violence, you know, sometimes you might be putting yourself at risk in these situations. Each of us has to decide for ourselves what we're up for. But I do think that like in the process of ending ignited violence, other, you know, people that are not part of the state, but who are influenced by what's going on and influenced by different, you know, white supremacists or whatever, that it's really important to do your own work about what kind of risks you're willing to take to interfere in the system. And each of us has to make that determination for ourselves, but it's also my belief that unless things are getting disrupted, we're probably not going to get the change that we really need. But I think that your point is really important. And I would say both, and that this isn't going to happen without some personal risk, and that we're going to teach strategies that limit your risk. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to share one more. So, wait, is this the same one? This one is how does I think I did the same thing. So what this one is going to be, so can you see the screen? The question is, what would you like if
nothing being shared yet?
In trouble. You can't see it? All right, I'll get it up here just a second. And I apologize for being a little slow on this one. Okay, now I will share the screen again. All right, so what would you like done if you were being harassed? How would someone support you? And if you feel like you want to, you can share some of your experiences.
Not to feel alone.
So think about if, you may have had an experience like this, or some time when you were in public, if you were in a situation where you felt physically threatened or harassed, what would you want somebody to do?
I think someone's just stepping right next to me and standing by me would mean a lot.
I would like, this is Linda, I'd like someone to just ask if everything's all right or if I'm all right.
This is Robert. Some sort of similar to that, some sort of social confirmation that other people are seeing what's going on, and kind of, social confirmation that yes, this is a bad situation happening here.
Right. Don't ignore it. Yeah.
I think if I were being harassed, I would want someone to, like I'm trying to sit, like, and I'm not being listened to have someone reinforce what I'm saying. Like say, she said that, kind of thing.
That's a really good one. You all keep that in mind for one of the scenarios we're going to do. Because especially if you're resisting yourself, you often want support for the resistance that you're doing. That's a really important one.
I'd like someone to answer my cry for help.
We couldn't hear you. Could you speak up a little?
I'd like someone to answer my cry for help.
Yeah, answer your cry for help. Let's do 2 or 3 more.
What's been effective in my case is having someone step in without drawing attention to the conflict and just start interacting with me in a way that allowed the situation to de-escalate.
Yeah, that can be really helpful. Any others? 1 or 2 more.
Yes, I would actually like someone to extract me from the negative interaction. Physically.
Mm-hmm. Great. This is a great list. 1 more?
I would like someone to act as if they were my friend and step in, as if they knew me.
Great.
Yeah, ask, didn't we have a coffee date?
Yeah, I can't, I was bullied when I was a kid in elementary school, and how I got my best friend was I was being bullied, and this new girl who came to the school just came and stood beside me. She didn't even know me and said, I'm her friend. If you mess with her, you have to mess with me. And that stopped the bully, and we became friends. That's how I got my best friend in elementary school.
That's great. That's a great story, Claire. That's a good one to end with, because I think that ultimately what this is being friends, understanding that of God and other people, and acting as though, we are connected and we have a responsibility to care for each other. Thank you. That's a good one to end with. All right. So now I'm going to move back to the PowerPoint. And these are what we did. Okay, so I want to talk to you about what the goals of intervention. So what you want to do, it's really a de-escalation frame. You really don't want to you want to choose a strategy which is not going to enervate the situation, make it worse. So you really want to reduce harm in the moment, and making your presence known, like in whatever way. It can be what some of you said, just like that somebody's paying attention and notices the wrong thing is happening. It can be saying something, but really making your presence known. And the other thing that's really important is that this is about the individual incident, but it's also about creating an atmosphere of boundaries and of making sure that people know this isn't okay. So, so you all may know of the moms in Portland that were protecting protesters against the secret police that were picking people up. So they are demonstrating obviously non-violently, their resistance to the acts of the state. And that's a really powerful thing to say, no, we don't allow this. This isn't okay. And in individual acts, you're not only intervening on behalf of the person who's being harmed, which is the most important thing, obviously centering them, but you're also showing other people that are witnessing this that that we as a community can say no to harmful acts, and that we don't have to just accept them happening. So I think that one's a really important one. So here are some tips for intervention. We're going to do a tiny bit of practice. So being alert and scanning your environment is really important. If everybody's always on their phone and not paying attention to their surroundings, it's going to be a lot harder for you to notice something and then step up to intervene. It's really important when you see something to notice how your body is responding and to really be in your body and be present and pay attention to what it is you're feeling and experiencing, which can give you a lot of information about how you need to behave or what you might be able to do. Remember to breathe, and either saying out loud or just saying it to yourself and say no, like this isn't okay. But actually just the act of saying no can be a powerful intervention all on its own. But the breathing, always in every situation, no matter what, if you're intervening with a family member in terms of a racist act, it's really important to stay in your body, to listen to your body, to be grounded as much as you can. And if you can go into a situation with a buddy, if possible, that's a really good thing. And if you're not with somebody, making eye contact with somebody else who's watching what's going on and getting them to align with you and act with you in the space, or even just to support what you're doing, can make a huge difference, because then you're not just all by yourself. And that's also a way of making it clear that the community around whatever's happening is calling in the community to support the intervention and not let it happen. I'm going to stop for just a second. I want you to make sure you're muted, and we're going to center ourselves and just ground. And I want you to, as loud as you can, with your mute button on, I'll leave mine off, to say no. And I just want you to imagine walking around and seeing something that you don't think should happen. It can be something that you've seen in the news recently, and to just as loud as you can say no. And I'm not going to count, just as soon as you feel like it, just say no. So, no.
No.
No. Yeah. No. Good. I think that I want you to think about how that feels. So to bodily actually say no and resist can be an empowering thing all on its own. And so really think about how that feels, what that sensation is like. All right, we're going to do, I'm going to show you where these are on our website. You can print these out, but we're going to go over so this is the People's Response Team in the process of developing this training. They really thought about this, and they said there's really, some pragmatic advice you can offer people about how to do this well. So I'm gonna move this up so I can see the screen. So I'm going to just read these, and then I'm going to pause at the end of each slide and see if you have any questions or anything you want to add. So do make your presence as a witness known. Make sure that especially for the person that's being harassed. If possible, make eye contact with the person being harassed and ask them if they want support, if that's possible. You can make eye contact and get some sense of the kind of support they want without saying anything as well. Move yourself near the person being harassed. If possible, and you feel you can risk doing so, create distance or a barrier between the person being harassed and the attacker. So this is one thing that you all said that you wanted if you were being attacked, to sort of move you away from the attacker. If it's safe to do so and the person being harassed consents, and they may not be able to consent in the moment, but you can always ask them after the incident if they consent, if you film something. But record the incident. It's becoming obviously the phone is becoming, it's a nuanced thing that has a lot of qualities to it, but the phone is also being used as a tool to disrupt and to record incidents, whether that's Amy Cooper in the park with Christian Cooper, or police harassment or other kinds of harassment, that the recording and the accountability can on and of itself be an intervention, or if the harassment continues, it can be a way to make people aware of it. It can be something that the person being harassed can use in court if needed. So I think that's an important tool. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and just ask or comment on these. Yeah, go ahead, BJ.
Okay, just a minute. Okay, when you had the part about breathing, you're basically saying center, calm. In Kung Fu, what we do is when we slow our breathing and become aware of it, you spread your legs slightly apart to about shoulder width, turn your toes slightly in, bend your knees, and sink into your roots while you're breathing. It can be done immediately, and if you practice at home, it will become one. And that way you have, your energy is sinking into a calm space. You also are making yourself ready and prepared for if there is anything physical. You have an incredible balance. You will not be knocked backwards if you do it low and legs apart. When you inhale and then exhale, just sink.
Thanks, that's great advice. Yeah, breathing, the power of the breath and the power of rooting yourself is really important. Any other comments or questions on this advice?
I have a question about the filming. I liked how you emphasized getting the person's permission afterwards, if possible. One of the concerns that I have about filming relates to some of our concerns earlier about not doing more violence to the person who is being abusive. And the concern is connected to these videos that then go viral, which end up with people losing their jobs and all of these other things. So I don't know how to get a balance with that.
I have real clarity about that. I mean, I actually, in the case of Amy Cooper, it was Christian Cooper who was the victim who reported it. And as far as I'm concerned, he had every right to report on the abuse that she gave him. And to me, it's not only about Amy Cooper. And Christian Cooper has said very publicly, there's a new law that says that he could be, she could have some fine or something because of what she did. And he has publicly said, that's not okay. I don't want, she did have public consequence for what happened. He's like, she doesn't need any more. But I do think that it's not only about Amy Cooper, it's about, for every Amy Cooper that gets recorded, and she was really enacting white privilege violence upon Christian Cooper in wanting to call the police on him. That we're in a cultural moment where we're trying to learn something different, and we need to be facing the fact that this is so prevalent in order to do that. So I have a real clarity that that kind of, especially if it's the victim who makes the choice, not necessarily the bystander, about whether to go public. I think that's really important, about who makes that choice. But I do think that having these kinds of things exposed is really critical in order for us to recognize the depth of the problem and be able to change. And I don't know, Trevor Noah has done some really powerful stuff on Amy Cooper in particular, Mark Lamont Hill. There's a lot of really powerful commentary about that. But nobody, basically, nobody should walk through a park birding and have the threat of the violence of the police enacted on them for asking somebody to put their dog on a leash. I mean, so I think that there's a cultural moment that we're in where the exposure is helping us see ourselves. I agree with Christian Cooper. I don't think that a deeper carceral response to what she did is the answer. I don't think that's where justice comes. I do think it is important that she suffered some consequences and exposure for what she did. Those shouldn't have to last forever. And I'm a believer in healing justice, that we need to take accountability and change who we are and how we are. And it's a huge moment for us, particularly as white people, to learn about how we show up automatically and in reactive ways that are actually dangerous to other people, to people of color, and to change that. So what I would say is I would center the victim and the victim, how they want such a recording to be used. And it's something that it's not, if you are a witness, it's not up to you to make that choice about whether that gets exposed. It's really important that you talk to the person and ask them how they want that footage to be used, if at all possible, and really engage with them. So that's where I would put the boundary around that.
So, and if I may say something as a person of color, all these events that are happening now are actually not new experiences.
Oh, I know.
Black people, this has been going on before, but the power of being able to film it is that people didn't, and I can tell you from growing up, when you would say these things happen, white people always denied. They just couldn't believe, no, that didn't. And so part of the reason that people of color who are victimized film these things is because it's become it's shown white people, yes, these things really do happen. They are happening, and you can't deny it because you see it there. I agree with Christian Cooper, though, that I don't think most Black people are asking that people's lives be devastated. They're asking that there be acknowledgement and that white people take a look at themselves and how they and how they are a part of that problem that constantly oppresses people of color, and that they not deny it, and that we have some consequence that teaches. And I think that's what Christian Cooper was hoping for Amy, that she learned something, he wasn't looking for vengeance. And I think a lot of people like myself feel that. We would like to see people learn something, but you know, until people could film it, there was massive white denial about these things.
Yeah, that's really important, Claire. And I think the other piece is that we want to make society unsafe for racism and enactments of white supremacy. We want it to like for people to feel. I mean, I myself want to operate from a sense of connection and a sense of integrity and justice. But I also like these incidents will hopefully make people think twice about their more, the issue with this is that it's an embedded in white supremacist systems. White people, our nervous systems operate reactively in this way. We've been trained to behave that way. We have to unlearn that. So I think that's, thanks, that's helpful, Claire.
I have a couple of comments that I've learned in terms
We
of.
can't hear you, unfortunately. Is there any way for you to speak up?
Does that help any?
No, you're still really muted.
It's been doing okay all day. Is that any better?
It's a little better, but if you can really project that.
In the hospital as nurses, we're often advised not to come between two people, but and also the more personal distance space is about your arm length and their arm length. So roughly about, I'd say 5 or 6 feet to stay out of the intimate space and certainly not, kind of loom over whoever is the aggressor because you're more likely to get hit. And the other suggestion is to stay turned to the side rather than face on with whoever the aggressor is, so that if they do try to strike you, you can not only be not hit quite so vulnerably, but also move out.
Great, thank you, that's helpful. So I'm going to move on to the next, this slide that I've moved to. Another do is to take cues from the individual being harassed. Is the person engaging with the harasser or not? You can make suggestions like, would you like to walk with me over here, move to another train car, for him to leave you alone, and then follow their lead. But I think somebody already said that they would want somebody, if you were resisting themselves, you would want support in that resistance. It's a really important principle. Often people who are being attacked are already resisting some way, and if you can support that, that's really helpful. Notice if the person being harassed is resisting in their own way and honor that. Especially white folks, don't police the tone of the person being harassed. If they're being very direct, even loud, don't tell them you need to do this in a different way. Do not, if somebody's is a victim and being attacked, they need to determine their level of resistance and the tone that they want to take with that. And follow up with the individual being harassed after the incident is over. See if they need anything else. Any quick questions or thoughts on this slide? Okay. So the last one is do keep both of you safe. Assess your surroundings. Are there others nearby you can pull in to support? Working in a team is a good idea. We already talked about that, if at all possible. Can you and the person being harassed move to a safer space or place? This is really important. De-escalation is the prime thing. If you're going to intervene, trying to keep everybody safe is really, really important. And it's an important principle. And it may not be without risk, but there are lots of things you can do that are not like direct confrontation, and actually avoiding direct confrontation, which is I think what this person was saying about staying away and intervening from the side, staying to the side of the person that's causing harm. Like really, you're really not trying to make things worse. And I think that's a really important principle. And there are so many things you can do without direct confrontation. Direct confrontation may be important and needed, but it's kind of the last tool in the toolbox. So I'm going to do these do's and then I'll pause before we do the don'ts. So this is another framework that's called the 4 Ds, which I think is really great because it goes from like more intense to more mild. So you can be direct, you step in directly to intervene. That can still be like an intervention, like do you want to go to the next train car? It can still be a softer de-escalating one, but it's more direct. You're really confronting the interaction. Distraction, you can do something to distract the harasser in particular and get their attention away from the person they're attacking. You can delegate, you can work with someone with more power than you and collaborate on how to intervene. There's going to be one scenario, as long as we get to them all, where you're going to get to think about that a little bit. But you can also delay. So you may not be able to figure out in the moment what to do. You may be shocked. It may be really hard to figure out how to intervene in the instance, but you can stay there. you can be present, and when the incident is over, you can stay with the person. You can check in with the person and ask them if they are okay. You can see if they need something like water. A coworker who took this bystander intervention the next day, she saw a homeless person being robbed and she wasn't able to stop the robbery. She was able to be a witness, and then she was there and stayed with that person, this houseless person, until they were safe, until they said, yes, I'm okay. I don't need you to stick around anymore. So, so that in itself, even if you're not able to intervene in the moment, can be very supportive and really important. Oh, it didn't stop. So anybody have any thoughts on any of these that I've presented so far?
I wonder if you could give an example of distracting a harasser. What might that look like in a scenario?
And yourself.
Great question. I think it could be you know, yelling at them, or I mean, it depends on what it is that they're doing. It could be something as like, you know, I think when I think about direct harassment, I think about yelling or diverting their attention, or it's like saying something like, you know, the security people are coming. Again, we don't want to call the police, but you could say something like that. There's, but I don't have, like, I think that others may have other examples of that, but that's what I think about, is particularly saying something and getting their attention. It could be, I'm trying to think of the different scenarios that we've worked through in that situations that I've been. That's the thing that comes to mind most easily, but other people may have other ideas.
Lucy,
Yeah,
Lucy, I've got, when you're working in a team, you mentioned the value of having more than one person. One person can say, hey man, did you lose your backpack? And he turns to look to you, and the other one escorts the victim away. So
That's
it's like
great.
it's a two-person effort.
That's great. That's a great example.
And getting in the way of the perpetrator's line of sight with the victim may also be another way of being more distracting and indirect.
That's a great suggestion too.
I wanted to contribute one thought, and that is a basic human behavior characteristic, the crowd effect, okay? That you must bear that in mind, especially when nobody's initiating anything. There's a reason for that too. Human beings tend to mirror what the group is doing, okay? If the group initiates something to diminish the interaction, that will be very favorable, but somebody has to start it. And, but keep in mind that potentially there is a lot of help available, but it's being kept in check because people have this tendency to to mirror other people's behavior, okay?
That's great. That's a really important one. And so so that points to that whole thing about presenting an alternative. So if you shift other people may be watching and witnessing and very uncomfortable by what's happening. And if you show another way, a channel sorry, my cat is here. Another channel for an option for how to channel that discomfort, people will likely, at least, you know, maybe one or two, maybe more, people may be supportive of your intervention.
This is Susan, and one of the things I'm being reminded of right now is like transforming power from AVP. And one of the things that we talked about is sort of like surprise or humor. And so I'm thinking about this woman who was in my meeting there in Boston who kept gummy bears. And so if something was going on the tee, she always imagined that she would get out the gummy bears and just start walking around and going to people, hey, do you want some gummy bears? Or a teacher I know who was just like, would go out in the hall when two kids were about to fight and just start clapping really loudly, just as a way to divert or share out the energy of that intervention in some way.
Great, that's a great suggestion as well. Wonderful. So I want to keep moving so you all have time to think about some scenarios, if that's okay. But keep all of what you're thinking in mind, and when we get to the scenarios, they may well be apply to those. So don't call the police. For many communities experience harassment, including Arab and Muslim communities, Black people, queer and trans folks, and immigrants. The police can cause a much greater danger for the person being harassed. Hopefully, given all of the very videotaped and prevalent examples of why that's harmful, should be enough to persuade you about that. And then don't escalate the situation. The goal is to get the person being harassed to safety, not to incite further violence from the attacker. And any comments on this before I'm going to show you a video in a sec. Oh, and don't do nothing. Silence is dangerous. It communicates approval and leaves the victim high and dry. If you find yourself too nervous or afraid to speak out, move closer to the person being harassed to communicate your support with your body. So if that's the one lesson that you take from this, that you are empowered to do something in these situations, even if all it is staying and waiting and telling somebody that you care about them after something has happened, that makes a huge difference, and it can really change both the atmosphere of a harmful act. So I'm going to turn over and stop sharing, and then I'm going to show you a video. Oh, whoops. I always forget to do the sound things on this momentarily. So you should be able to hear this clearly. Here we go.
The United States has a long history of violence against people of color, disabled people, Muslims, immigrants, and LGBTQ people. In our current political moment, white supremacists and white nationalists have been emboldened, and as a result, public attacks are on the rise. Many people aren't sure what to do if they witness a racist or transphobic attack. Here are some ideas. It might be tempting to look away out of fear or because you aren't sure of what to do. But not getting involved communicates approval and leaves the victim high and dry. If you can, talk with the victim. This is about supporting them. Look them in the eye, check in with them. Try not to escalate or provoke the perpetrator. Simply sitting or standing next to someone is better than nothing at all. It's difficult to witness any kind of violence, so try to breathe and stay present. Many assume others will document an incident going on. If it's safe to do so and the victim doesn't object, film or record an incident. This helps to keep track of the rise of incidents like this, and it also ensures that the victim's versions of events can be confirmed. Check in with the victim. Ask them what they need. Get their consent and offer concrete ways to support them. Get them water. Help them get composed. Help them call a friend or even get to a safer place. Armed police presence often escalates rather than reduces the risk of violence in a situation. Because police have been trained to see people of color, gender nonconforming folks, and Muslims as criminals, they often treat victims as perpetrators of violence. So if the victim hasn't asked you to call the police, do not, I repeat, do not call the police. The culture of white supremacy and anti-Blackness is perpetuated by our media, political systems, and social media. You can contribute to making these attitudes unacceptable by challenging white supremacy even when you're not in a crisis. If you're white yourself, talk to your white family and friends about anti-Blackness and white supremacy. Do it every day, especially when you're in an all-white space. By doing this, you confront the culture without putting anyone else in danger of an immediate backlash. Now is the time for all of us who believe in justice to come together. It doesn't have to look one way. You can canvass, you can phone bank, you can write letters, or you can even create art for the movement. Taking it to the streets is always nice. But if you don't have time for that, you could always support the marginalized populations who are on the front lines of this work financially. White supremacy and anti-Blackness affects all of us, and fighting against it affirms all of our humanity.
So I wanted to follow up on something that she said. She obviously talks a little bit about intervening in racist comments. And I just wanted to, there was a really great podcast that was done. I think it was, what is it called? I can't remember. It's the NPR podcast on race, Code Switch, I think it is. And they talked about why are so many white people showing up for Black Lives Matter protests right now, when the prevalence of white people in them in the past has not been that high. And they had three things. One was the pandemic and sort of the way that was revealing the system, as well as people being pent up. But that was one element. One element was, I can't remember it, but one really important element was white people talking to other white people, because 75%, this is a startling statistic, 75% of white people have no friends of color. And so if you want to create change and more people massively being on the streets or being involved in these, white people need to be talking to other white people. And it's a really critical way to intervene, a really critical intervention. So I just wanted to mention that in line of what somebody mentioned in terms of what they were hoping to get out of today, just a little bit. So we're going to go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment. I think it's really important when racist statements are being made by a white person for another white person to intervene. There's studies to show that, but I also had a personal experience when I was in training as a physician. I was in a, I'll take this off while I'm talking. I was at a conference on a patient, and a doctor in seniority, a senior attending, made a very racist comment about, an untrue comment about Black mothers. And all of the staff, except for one person, just sat there with their heads down while this person said this stuff in front of me. It was very hurtful. It was hurtful that other people didn't respond. But there was this one social worker, and she took a real risk to do this because she was not high on the totem pole, who stepped up to the plate and said, "Dr. So-and-so, you know what you're saying is racist, hurtful, and untrue." And that stopped that person in her tracks. She didn't, I don't think she stopped being a racist, but she never made any more racist comments the whole time I was there. And that was, again, I gained a friend because that person, that social worker is my friend to this day. But I think it's really important for whites, when you said something about comments, when you hear someone else saying something verbally abusive, as you said right there, it's important for you as to step up and say something. You don't have to be belligerent. You could be just like my friend Sandy was. And she wasn't my friend at the time she did this. You can just say that's not right. That's racist, or just make a statement.
Right, and there's you know, there's the question about how do you do that when it's somebody in your family. I mean, I think that as I said, we're gonna have a video in, I don't know, 3 weeks. We're gonna be doing one of the sessions of Radical Acting in Faith for White People that's specifically about that, specifically about diagnosing the situation and then being able to, and that video will be available. But again, I think what Claire's comment speaks to is doing nothing perpetuates the problem. And so even if you do it in a clumsy way or aren't sure exactly how to do it, saying something when that kind of thing happens is really important and creates a different kind of atmosphere. So we're going to do a couple scenarios. We're going to do two, and then we're going to talk about the one that Helen sent. So the way that we're going to do these, let's see, I'm going to take this off of full screen, is, actually I can leave it on, I think. I'm going to read the scenario. I'm always going to serve as the role of the aggressor because I don't want to put any of you in that position. And then I want somebody else to volunteer to act in these other roles that are in the scenario, and to think about what it is that you would do in that situation. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's weird to do this on Zoom, but I still think that we can get a little bit of a sense of it from doing this. So I'm going to read it, and then I'll tell you the roles, and just like unmute yourself and tell me if you want to be in that role and who you are, because right now I can't really see because of the screen sharing. And then we'll take a breath, and then we'll act it out. This is public verbal abuse where the person being targeted is responding assertively. So you and your friend are walking in a crowded shopping area and you overhear yelling. You stop and notice that a man you perceive to be white is shouting aggressively at an older Black woman, including telling her to get a job. She is yelling back and pointing her cane at him, telling him to leave her alone. What do you do? So obviously I'm going to be the older white man shouting aggressively. Who would like to be the older Black woman to act out that role?
I'm willing to be that. This
I
is Susan
hear you
McEwen.
very well. So if you can really talk really loudly, that would
Oh no.
Yeah, that's better if you can really talk loudly, especially if you're acting out this person.
Oh yeah, I could yell a lot louder.
Okay, there, that's better. I can hear you better.
Susan, if you can bring the little microphone that's attached to your cord, to your earbuds, bring it closer to your mouth.
Okay.
You'll be more audible.
That help?
Yeah, that is better. Yeah,
okay.
better. Okay, so who would like to be, in this case, there are two people, one person and their friend who are the interventionists. Who would like to be one of those two people? Come on, don't be shy. There are a lot of you here. You can do this.
I can. Can I use obscenities?
We're gonna try not, even me as the aggressor, I'm gonna try not to use obscenity.
Okay, so G-rated reaction.
Yes, or
Not
PG.
quite, can't do a WTF here.
Oh, no. Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
Yeah. Yeah, you, and in the real situation you might, but in this, we're gonna try not. We'll just get the tone and the feeling. So is there somebody else who wants to be that person's friend?
This is Karen. I'll try.
Okay, so if Karen and Susan?
Helen, I think.
Oh, Helen.
Helen,
okay.
yeah. If I can
Karen, Helen, and who's the third person?
Susan is the victim.
Okay, great. Susan is the victim, and Karen and Helen are going to be the interveners. All right, so, and I am going to be the one shouting aggressively. So let's take a deep breath. What are you doing here?
Get
You don't
out of
belong
my
here.
face. I'm sitting here quietly.
You need no.
Yeah, this is my quiet spot. I'm just sitting here waiting for my daughter.
Hey,
Go
man,
away.
what are you doing?
She's not supposed to be here.
I have every right to be here.
She has as much right. She has the right to be here
Thank
too.
you. I appreciate your saying that, because look, buddy, I have the right to sit here.
Well, I don't think so, but
I don't see how you can even live with yourself. Look, she uses a cane, and you're picking on a woman who uses a cane.
Well, she doesn't belong here, but
I have every right to be here.
I have someplace I need to be.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Well, it's hard to do it, again, just verbally. And let people intervene. But I want to so how did that feel? Those of you, how did it feel,
I was a
Susan?
little worried when I can't remember exactly what somebody said, but you were beginning to back off, and then and then she said, "Well, how can you be like that? You know, she's obviously got a cane or something." Like, I wondered if that was going to escalate it.
I think for me, the fact that the guy is white, I felt more like, okay, you know, he's a white guy, but I wonder if these things were reversed. If it was a black man who, I mean, do we reverse the races here? And it was a black person harassing a white person, would I really feel safe to confront?
I really wonder if that would happen in a mall.
It's very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
It's statistically unlikely. But I think that there's a lot of delicacy in terms of intervention in that particular way. But I want other people to think about what do you think worked in terms of their intervention, Karen and Helen's intervention? You can just unmute yourselves and speak.
So it was difficult following it because, you know, nobody can move online. And it wasn't always possible to hear who was speaking. So there was just a limitation, I guess. Yes.
Yeah, there is, but I still, yeah. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
This is Linda. I was going to say that I thought it was good that they kind of distracted the aggressor from the other person. And that to me was helpful.
Also the fact that they seconded what she was saying.
Yeah, that was helpful for me, that they repeated what I said.
Right. That is, I think, really important, that they were supporting what she was doing and doing that really, really overtly. And I think that the last piece, like in some ways, like the last thing of what, you know, why are you doing this to somebody? I mean, I, as the aggressor, had started to retreat, so it might be okay to say something like that, just to land on, but I think that could escalate. And I think that supporting her in what she was doing is the strongest piece of the intervention. And that's what I was impressed that you all did that, because I do this scenario with people a lot. And that's not often the interventions that people do. And I think that the key learning in this is the supporting of somebody who's already resisting and how to do that. And I think that's a really important thing. I was impressed that you all made that choice.
This
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
I think it was another limitation of doing it online, that the responses needed to be verbal. But I was impressed that the victim was doing a pretty good job herself. And I was thinking that if the two people approaching just would have stood with her and maybe looked at the aggressor, that he might have backed down with just the number of people there. And, you know, maybe some words would have been necessary, but maybe it could have been handled almost non-verbally.
It's possible. And so I think that those insights are really important. And and I want to say that there's lots of strategies, and there's things that I think are more effective, but I think that there's not really a wrong thing when you're trying to do this. I mean, unless you really escalate it. So, so this is based on a real scenario. Some people that were in the people's response team were in a mall. Yelled at by a white person, and she was resisting and yelling back at him, and they stood by her. So I think that you could be nonverbal and just be a presence, but what they did is they yelled with her. They said the same things. They took their tonal and energy words from what she had said, and they yelled back at the man, and he did retreat. So they were basically amplifying her strategy, and it was pretty effective. So I was impressed that you all figured that out as a technique. And Thank you very much. I appreciate you stepping up.
Can we, for the next one, can you take down the picture so we can see
Yes,
it?
I will. That's a really good idea. I will do that. So this one, we're going to do this one with the police just because that's so prevalent right now. So I'm going to read it to you once you get it, and then I'll take it down. Thank you, Claire, for asking me to do that so we can see people. This is a situation involving the police harassing a stranger. So you and a friend are walking home past a 7-Eleven and notice 2 police officers harassing someone who appears to be houseless and telling them they cannot sit on the hot sidewalk. You also observe that the manager employee of the store is watching the situation. What do you do? So all of this is important. All of those details are important. One more time, and then we'll ask for volunteers. You and a friend are walking home past a 7-Eleven and notice 2 police officers harassing someone who appears to be houseless and telling them they cannot sit on the sidewalk. You also observe that the manager employee of the store is watching the situation. What do you do? So for this one, I'll stop the sharing and I'll turn us to gallery view. So for this one, I need somebody who's going to be a police officer with me. So if somebody can do that, volunteer to do that first. Just unmute yourself and say, I know nobody wants to be a police officer right now, but come on.
All right, I'll play the baddie with you.
Thank you, Robert. And who would like to be the houseless person? Come on.
Be that.
Who said that?
Peter Wood.
Oh, Peter, great. And who would like to be the 2 people walking? Who would like to be the store owner or the store manager first? Come on, this is the way to learn this.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Jeff.
Great, thanks. And then we need the 2 people walking by. So you get to practice intervening. Come on, all right, Flo.
Oh, come on. I need a friend.
All right, and Wink. All right, Flo and Wink are going to be the people intervening. Robert's going to be the police officer with me. Peter is going to be the houseless person. And then who is going to be the store manager? I forgot.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff.
Who's my friend?
Oh, Wink.
Wink. Oh, all right. Okay, I know we can do this.
All right, so let's turn to speaker view and then you'll be able to hear the person speaking at an individual time. So, so Robert, you and I need to start this off. Let's take a deep breath. Remember who you are. I'm going to probably try and slow it down by like saying something, leaving space, and then saying something again so that we can all hear what people are trying to do. So let's begin. Sorry, you can't be sitting here. We're going to write you up, or it's not okay. You have to move. This is private property. You have to move off of this private property.
I don't understand.
I don't like what's happening over there. Let's go sit beside him.
Yeah, I don't even think it's private property.
You're not helping the situation. You're not helping the situation.
Come on.
I don't understand. This is a public sidewalk.
Okay.
I'm not harming anybody.
It's a public sidewalk, sir.
Please
I don't
step
understand.
back. Please step back. This is a police matter.
We've had complaints. You need to, and this person needs to move.
Who complained? Who complained?
Come on, Wink.
about
Let's
me?
sit down beside him.
Let's sit. We're sitting.
Who complained? I haven't done any harm.
We are sitting.
Well, you're sitting on
Sitting
one
beside him.
step and you're interfering with the customers coming in.
No, I'm not in the doorway. I'm just sitting on the sidewalk.
Not getting in the way.
I'm sorry, if you continue to sit, we're going to have to arrest all of you.
That's okay. We can do that.
You don't want to be pulled into this situation.
Listen,
I've been pulled in worse.
I really appreciate this help because this is something they do to me all the time. I haven't hurt anybody, and this is public property.
That's right.
Well,
and he's not spreading out.
Not allowed to be
He's
here.
just
It's not
sitting.
okay.
There's no law I'm breaking. What law am I breaking?
You're sitting too close to my store.
There's no law saying
don't
too
like
close
that.
to a store I don't get to
When
sit.
the manager store asks us to remove a house person sitting there, then we have to take action.
No, you don't. No, you don't, because this is public property.
I'm taking a rest. Anybody is allowed to rest.
All right, well, next time we're writing you a warning, and next time we will be taking you in.
Okay, write your warning, but I'm still resting here.
As we're resting with him because we're tired too.
Yeah. And tired of this kind of treatment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you all. So, Peter, how did that feel as the person that was being targeted in the situation?
I felt kind of feisty. I couldn't quite account for it. I felt like I was a little bit daring you to do your worst, and it probably wasn't too strategic.
Yeah, maybe, but yeah. How did that feel for the two friends that were intervening?
I was just afraid I wouldn't be able to get up off the sidewalk once we were there.
Well, but I knew I could help you, so no problem.
Or the police.
And what about the store manager?
Well, I had no problems with that role because sadly, this mirrors exactly what is going on in a town that I'm involved in, Pontiac, Michigan. There is a homeless shelter, happens to be almost in the middle of town, and store owners are continuously calling because the police are harassing. I mean, the police come in and deal with the houseless population.
Well, and well, that's sad to hear. And it's also really interesting because I think that scenario was up front of mind. The store manager is a really important role. So in the to-dos, one of the things that we said is try and find somebody who has more power, who can intervene. And one option, but you had already chosen your role in terms of supporting the police, and that's always a possibility in this scenario, that the store managers or owner is going to call the police and have them deal with the situation they don't want to, or remove a houseless person. So but another approach for the friends could be to try and get the store manager to act differently, to ask the police to go away, actually be willing to do that. So that's another approach. What does everybody think about the approach that the friends took?
I wondered if it escalated the situation.
Wasn't very effective.
You know, it's funny. I mean, I was trying to play a role, of course, as we all were, but I immediately began feeling that I'm in the right, of course, because I'm playing that role. But I did feel, it felt maybe a little bit at times like it was escalating, escalating the police reaction maybe. Or maybe I was just fully committed to the role, sorry.
It felt a little bit like that. Yeah, it was hard. It really depends on who those people are, because in some instances, and it depends on how, whether there are real ordinances that would support what the police are doing. But I think that in many ways, what you did, for me, it felt effective because you were together, you were offering solidarity, and that was a real intervention. And I especially love that when I said, we're going to arrest you too, that you said, oh, well, that's okay. Because that felt like, even if the police go ahead and do it, it's a really powerful statement to Peter and as the houseless person, that you would stand with him. And it's a powerful statement to us as the police officers that that was not deterring you from your support. So I thought that was really a really admirable action. And
well, I've been arrested, so
yes.
it's not the end of the world.
Yes, yeah, me too.
Lucy, I want to announce a 5-minute warning till the half hour.
All right, great, yes. And I have another meeting right after this. So I want to quickly leave you with this scenario thank you. I want to actually give a round of applause for those people who volunteered. That was really, really helpful and hopefully gave you a real sense of this. But I want to end by reading, I'm going to give you some resources, but I also want to read this, this scenario that Helen sent, which is from Karen Nguyen in Albin, Michigan. And it describes an incident that just happened really recently. And I don't know if we'll have time to talk it through. Maybe we will. But I really want you to think about what it is you would have done in this situation. My father moved to Alma, Michigan in 2000 with my mother. I was born in Gratiot County Hospital, and I attended and graduated from Alma Public Schools. Our family makes up a small portion of the incredibly small Asian population in our city. Today, July 12th, 2020, while shopping at our local Meijer, I was told by an unmasked elderly Caucasian man with white hair and a long white beard riding on a motorized shopping cart to go back to your own country. Never in my entire 19 years of existence have I ever been so publicly ridiculed on the basis of race. This definitely isn't the most original line used to discriminate against people of color. However, my first time hearing this phrase directed towards me, to my face, in my hometown, with my 9-year-old sister by my side. As soon as the words came out of his mouth, I froze. I didn't say a single word. I just stared as he drove away. My heart and my body as I processed his words. Immediately, I felt an immense disappointment in myself for my slow reaction. However, no one tells you exactly how to react in the situation because no one expects you to be in the situation. I didn't take his photo. I didn't go to a Meijer employee. I didn't even call my parents to tell them what had happened. All I could do was stand there and replay his words over and over in my head. It is so much easier to be a racial justice warrior behind a keyboard. It is so much easier to talk about racist individuals than to talk to them. About 20 minutes after this encounter, I caught up to him about to exit the building. I walked up to him and told him that we were in fact born in America, to which he replied, "Sure don't look like it." The only reason I had enough nerve to go up to him was because my 15-year-old sister was with me. I've always told her to stand up for herself, and I had to prove that I could do it too. Yet I still let him have the last word. We see these types of encounters in films and social media and the news, but actually experiencing this was so different. It's humiliating, it's infuriating, it's stressful. In real life, we don't automatically have witty, life-changing comments on the tip of our tongues. And even if we do, sometimes the shock of the situation jumbles up our thoughts and leaves us speechless.
That's true.
The matter is that you can live somewhere your whole life and still feel like you don't belong. Words hurt. I cannot stress that enough. No matter how simple the insult may be, your words can uncover years of feeling embarrassed, isolated, left out, etc. I'm ashamed of this man that thought it was appropriate to say such things to a 19-year-old girl. I'm ashamed of the other people standing right next to me who watched the entire encounter and didn't say a word. I'm ashamed of how racial discrimination is such a prominent part of society. I am afraid. I am afraid for my 4 younger sisters who will possibly find themselves in situations like this, or even worse. I'm afraid that they may have to handle it alone. I'm afraid that they may just accept it as a part of life, allowing themselves to be criticized for a piece of their identity. I'm afraid for my non-English speaking relatives who may walk about unknowingly being mocked or scorned at. I am afraid that these injustices will continue to burden our community and our country. I hope this small snippet of my experiences as a woman of color offers some form of enlightenment. I hope that people will understand that racism exists everywhere, no matter how small the town may be. If there was one main takeaway to this narrative, it's this. I hope people will continue to educate themselves on the injustices of this world and actively work to become more knowledgeable and more kind. So we're not going to have time to process that, but I think that's a really good to think about what you would have done and how important if somebody had stood up for her, how important that act of solidarity probably would have been to her.
I don't have the response now, but if someone wants to follow up, I've sent Karen, I'll get the chills just hearing you read that. It was published in our county paper, but I did email her. I don't have the response now, but I can send it to Lucy. I emailed her and said, what would you have liked those bystanders to do at that time? So I will share that. You know, once I get that response from her, I'll send that on to Lucy.
That would be great. And
I can, yeah, I can definitely email that to Carolyn. So
yeah, and we are at 4:30. Thank you for sharing that. It's a very powerful, like really recent example of how important this work is. The last thing I wanted to share with you is that you can find all of these resources, a recorded webinar, the tips, the video, etc. here at afsc.org, Bystander Intervention. I'll put that link in the chat. And I really appreciate you all being here and thinking on this and being willing to think about how to do this in your life. So I really appreciate you all being here. Let's take a moment of worship and then I have another call I need to be on.
Thank you, Lucy.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and I hope the rest of your yearly meeting sessions go very well and that you feel gathered.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
See
Thank you.
you next week.